You know, surprisingly, this bike and the KLR are almost the same price. In the used market, of course. You know, this one, of course, is much more expensive, new. But in the used market, these early gen Super Teneres, they're what, like 5,000 to 6,000, and the KLR is like the one I have, the newer one, is 4,000 to 5,000. So like $1,000 more gets you this bike. And the question is, what kind of rider are you? Are you more of an off-road type of rider, or are you more of a road rider? The suspension on this is just so much better. That's the thing that as soon as you get on this bike, when you just ride it a little bit, you notice the weight right away, but you also notice that the suspension is much better than the KLR. And of course, you know, the more expensive the bike, the better suspension. You know, this is the bike that's got the best suspension I've ever had. And Yamaha generally puts really good suspension in their bigger bikes. You know, even the FJR I had really good suspension. I can't say the same thing with the ST1300 I had from Honda. The suspension on that was a little bit definitely more cushy, wallowy, but I enjoyed it. But this one, the handling is excellent for such a big bike. It doesn't feel like such a big bike when you're riding it, because the suspension helps it out so much. North, and the more north you go, just a few like miles, you start to see more snow. Yesterday I drove to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and it was just packed full of snow. But in the National Harbor, there's zero snow. Like, you don't see snow on the sides, you don't see it on the grass anymore. So it's kind of funny that just a few miles distance, it becomes very different. Oh man, it's getting colder up here, Jesus, or my hands at least are freezing. You know, if you're gonna ride in the winter, this bike is a better bike than the KLR650. And I do wonder which bike I would keep if I was to get rid of a bike. The KLR definitely is a better overall bike than the Super Tenere, but I do like some of the things that this bike has. You know, the engine in the KLR is great, but I think that the Yamahas generally have better fit and finish and durability. And I think that if I was to keep a bike for a very long time, the Super Tenere would be a better bike to keep and just keep piling on miles. This one's got what, close to 55,000 miles. I think it's 54 or 55,000. The KLR650, when you get like a KLR650 with 50,000, it's already starting to have a lot. But this bike feels like it's a brand new bike. There isn't much difference between the quality that you get from a new one and this one. You notice I'm going super slow. It's gotten much colder and there's much more snow here, and it's always a bad idea. Yeah, like, I just don't want to take a chance of dropping a expensive heavy bike off-road. I think I would do like light off-road. That looks awesome. There's snow there, but it looks like from a distance that there is no snow. Yeah, I do wonder what I would do if I was to get the new KLR650, but I honestly don't think it's worth getting the new KLR650. You know, it's upgraded looks, upgraded fuel injection, a few changes here and there, but when you're cheap like me, you think old KLR650, new KLR650, which one to get? And the old one, I think it wins every time, because the whole point of the KLR is that you are doing more with less. And I think that's what I like about bikes like the KLR, is that you can do a lot more with less, and it kind of feels good when you're out riding these guys on BMWs that spent $28,000, $27,000, $25,000 to buy those bikes, and all they do is ride to Starbucks, or they go on these trails with their friends, and their friends takes photos of them like crossing a creek or something, and then that's it. The KLR type of rider is a little bit different than most riders. You would think that the KLR crowd would be the same as the adventure crowd, but they're not. The adventure crowd, I think, mostly now it's just posers. There's a lot of posers, and it's like an 80% poser rate, 20% rider rate. But the KLR guys are mostly hardcore, and they are notorious, known as being like these guys that will do, you know, they'll put like milk baskets, milk crates in the back of their motorcycles. They're not into getting like the ADV luggage, the lifestyle luggage. Whenever I think about the KLR guys, I also think of like the BMW guys, because they're such a big difference in mentality. The KLR guys are always thinking about, I don't want this, it'll weigh the bike down. Why would I need a fuel gauge? You know, I can count the miles on my trip. You know, unnecessary things will weigh you down. It's a minimalistic style of life. Oh man, there is ice on that road. I gotta be careful here. There's a very minimalistic style of KLR rider that's really interesting. And every single KLR rider that I've met they don't come from this lifestyle of luxury, which I appreciate. But the BMW guys, a lot of the guys that I've met that own BMWs, I'm not going to say they're posers. There's some that are hardcore, but they definitely have a lot of money, and if something breaks, they just fix it. But the KLR guys, they're like, I am going to glue this with JB Weld. It's going to get me home, and then I'm going to like fabricate the part myself. I don't need to spend money. I kind of like that. When you buy a KLR650, even the new one, you're making a statement. It's really like this anti-marketing statement, because by all accounts, the KLR650 should not sell well. It's one of these bikes that it doesn't have any like hype, and even the way KLR or Kawasaki marketed this new KLR was like to get rid of the old KLR and pretend that they were going to stop production. I just had to honk at him. I knew that the other guy was following him, but that's just rude. You shouldn't do that. But why did I ride this bike instead of the KLR today? Well, this bike has been sitting in the garage for quite some time, and the battery is flattening out. It's if I leave it unplugged for a while, it just goes flat. And the thing is, I've been riding the scooter most of the time, so I really wanted to get this bike, you know, exercised. You know, a bike that's kind of like a good middle ground from the KLR and the Super Tenere is the Africa Twin. The Africa Twin is definitely a little bit more dirt oriented than this, and it has the kind of like almost the same road manners. Definitely leans a little bit more off-road. Yeah, you know, I think the first generation Super Tenere still make really great bikes in 2021. You know, I've done a video about should you get a Super Tenere in 2021, and I still think it's a really great bike. You know, there's really good bikes out there, but you just cannot beat the prices of these used Super Teneres. Super Teneres. I keep saying Tenere. I don't know why, but you can absolutely get amazing deals. And when you kind of consider what you get for the money, you get an adventure bike, an open class adventure bike with 110 horsepower. I think it's like 100 something horsepower, and then 110 pounds of torque. It's kind of like a crazy amount of torque for the money. And then of course you get the rear drive, you know, the shaft drive, which is really intensely good, and you get really good suspension. And in the used market, it's hard to get this sort of bang for the dollar. The only bikes you could get from BMW are very high mileage and like maybe the early 2000s GSs. It just feels really good, man. This bike is just so easy to live with. I just love that I can stack tons of miles on this bike. I can go for a 200-mile ride and it feels like I haven't really moved. It's so comfortable. Well, it's kind of funny that as soon as you come down a little bit more, the snow starts disappearing. Just a few miles, it makes a big difference. In the end, getting a GS, ADV bike, open class bike like the Super Tenere or a KLR650 or Africa Twin, it's really a matter of personality. You know, as much as I see myself riding off-road, I don't do it enough to really warrant a very off-road oriented bike. So a road bike is better for me. I would like to have a really nice dual sport bike. The KLR might be that because I don't mind getting it dirty. But then again, this one, for the type of riding that I do, is just as good as the KLR. I don't really feel like I need to get a KLR to do this sort of riding. Now the beautiful thing about the KLR, it gets like 50 something miles to the gallon. This one gets like 35, 40, and it's a very limited range. The KLR will literally get you with 300 something miles, and that's incredible. This thing, 170 miles, I'm hitting the reserve. I think it's just ridiculous. Here's the Super Tenere. I'm really liking this bike, but every time I have to fill it up, I hate it. But man, look how wide it is. That's the KLR650 Super Tenere. They're very different, but just look how massive that Super Tenere is. Like, it's so much wider, but not too much, you know. But the wideness of it is interesting. That bike is very well designed. As far as like the wind, there's no buffeting at all. The KLR650 hits me a little bit more on the top and the sides. But when you look at the Super Tenere, this part is so wide because the radiator is actually here, and you have a lot of space to kind of put your legs on the bike. So basically what that means, it's a very comfortable bike. On the highway, you barely feel the wind in your legs, and when you're riding off-road, that's really what you want. You want a bike that's will divert the wind around you. The KLR, it is so much more narrow, even though it's got the radiator right in the front. This one, the radiator is on the side. The battery is higher up. It's got more weight up top, but look at the fork suspension. It's so much better on this than this. The suspension on this KLR is better than the old KLR, but it's still very different. And the big difference, of course, is that front tire on the KLR. It's a 21 inch as opposed to the 19 inch on the Super Tenere. Kind of stuck here. The cops won't bother me.